Welcome to the Discourse Analyzer AI Toolkit, where articles come alive. You're listening to the audio version of our article. For the full text and an interactive experience, check out the link in the description below. Interact with any selection using our AI assistant to enhance your understanding. Let's explore.
Case studies in environmental discourse analysis. Environmental discourse analysis reveals how language shapes understanding and policy on environmental issues. Case studies such as the Dakota Access Pipeline, DAPL, climate change media coverage, Amazon deforestation narratives, plastic pollution discourse, and sustainable agriculture policy highlight diverse perspectives and discursive practices that inform public perception and policy. 1. The Dakota Access Pipeline, DAPL. Jaskier Dillon is a scholar who has extensively studied the intersection of environmental justice, indigenous rights, and activism. Her work on the Dakota Access Pipeline, DAPL, is particularly notable for analyzing the environmental discourse surrounding this contentious infrastructure project. 1. Overview of the Dakota Access Pipeline. The DAPL is a 1,172-mile pipeline designed to transport crude oil from North Dakota to Illinois. The project sparked significant controversy due to its potential environmental impact, particularly concerning the drinking water sources and sacred lands of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. 2. Key themes in Dillon's analysis. Environmental justice. Dillon examines how the discourse around the DAPL emphasizes environmental justice, highlighting how marginalized communities often bear disproportionate environmental burdens. She notes that the Standing Rock protests spotlighted the unequal impacts of environmental degradation on indigenous communities. Indigenous sovereignty. Her work underscores how the discourse surrounding the pipeline reflects issues of indigenous sovereignty. The protests highlighted the ongoing struggle of Native American tribes to assert their rights over their lands and resources, which are often overlooked or undermined in favor of economic interests. Activism and solidarity. Dillon analyzes how the DAPL discourse galvanized a broad coalition of activists. This solidarity extended beyond environmental issues, highlighting intersections with racial and social justice movements. The Standing Rock protests became a focal point for environmental activism, emphasizing a collective call for climate justice. Corporate power and state violence. Dillon discusses the role of corporate power and state violence in the discourse. The deployment of private security forces and law enforcement to quell protests was framed as a misuse of power that prioritized corporate interests over human rights and environmental concerns. Media representation. She also touches on how the media framed the protests and the pipeline itself. The coverage often presented conflicting narratives, reflecting broader societal debates about economic development versus environmental protection. 3. Insights from Dillon's analysis, highlighting injustices. Dillon's analysis reveals the deep-rooted inequalities in environmental governance, demonstrating how environmental decisions often marginalize indigenous voices. Discourse as a tool for advocacy. The Standing Rock protests serve as a case study of how discourse can be used to mobilize support and draw attention to environmental injustices. Intersectional environmentalism. Her work emphasizes the need for an intersectional approach to environmentalism, one that recognizes the interconnectedness of environmental, social, and racial justice. Jaskier Dillon's analysis of the Dakota Access Pipeline case provides a nuanced understanding of the discourse surrounding environmental justice and indigenous rights, emphasizing the critical role of activism and media in shaping public perception and policy. 2. Climate change in the media. Maxwell T. Boykoff is a prominent scholar known for his research on climate change communication, particularly how media frames climate change issues. His work explores how media coverage affects public perception and understanding of climate change. 1. Key insights from Boykoff's research. Media framing of climate change. Boykoff analyzes how media frames influence public understanding of climate change. He highlights the prevalence of frames such as doom and gloom, emphasizes the catastrophic consequences of climate change, often leading to a sense of hopelessness. Economic Frames focuses on the economic costs and benefits of climate policies, influencing public perception based on economic priorities. Scientific Uncertainty highlights the uncertainty in climate science, which can lead to public skepticism about climate change. Balance as Bias. Boykoff is known for his concept of balance as bias, which argues that the media's attempt to present balanced coverage can create a false equivalence between the overwhelming scientific consensus on climate change and a minority of skeptical voices. This framing often misleads the public into believing there is significant scientific debate where there is little. The evolving coverage of climate change. He examines how media coverage of climate change has evolved over time, noting shifts in attention, tone, and framing based on political, economic, and social contexts. This includes how coverage changes in response to events like international climate negotiations, extreme weather, or political changes. Media as a mediator. Boykoff emphasizes the role of media as a mediator between scientific findings and the public. The framing of climate issues in media influences how the public perceives the urgency and importance of climate action. Global Perspectives. His work also compares media coverage of climate change across different countries, highlighting variations in framing due to cultural, political, and economic differences. These comparisons reveal how national contexts shape the discourse on climate change. 2. Boykoff's contributions to environmental discourse analysis, critical analysis of media influence. His work provides insights into how media framing affects public perception of climate change and highlights the importance of accurate and responsible journalism. Understanding public opinion. By analyzing media coverage, Boykoff helps explain how media influences public opinion and political will for climate action. Global and comparative approach. His research includes comparative analyses that help understand the differences in climate discourse across countries and regions. Maxwell T. Boykoff's research underscores the critical role of media in shaping climate change discourse, revealing how framing influences public understanding and attitudes towards climate policy. His work highlights the importance of responsible media coverage to inform and engage the public effectively on climate issues. 3. Deforestation in the Amazon. Stephen Nugent, an anthropologist with a focus on the Amazon, has contributed to the understanding of environmental discourse surrounding deforestation in the region. His work often delves into how different narratives shape the perception and policy surrounding deforestation. 1. Key insights from Nugent's work: multiple narratives. Nugent examines the different narratives surrounding deforestation in the Amazon, noting that various stakeholders present different stories to justify or criticize deforestation. These narratives include: economic development promotes deforestation for agricultural expansion and economic growth, often emphasizing the potential for wealth creation and improved livelihoods. Conservation and preservation advocates for the protection of the Amazon for its biodiversity, indigenous cultures, and role in regulating the global climate. Indigenous rights highlights the impact of deforestation on indigenous communities whose livelihoods and cultures are closely tied to the forest. Contradictory goals. Nugent points out the contradictions between different goals, such as economic development and conservation, which create tensions in how deforestation is approached in policy and practice. Global versus local narratives. He contrasts global narratives that emphasize the Amazon's role in global environmental health with local narratives that focus on immediate economic needs. This discrepancy often leads to conflicts in how deforestation should be managed. Media representation. Nugent discusses how the media shapes public perception of the Amazon, sometimes oversimplifying the issues or perpetuating certain narratives that influence public opinion and policy. Complex social dynamics. Nugent emphasizes the complexity of social dynamics in the Amazon, including the diverse interests of local communities, governments, corporations, and NGOs. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for comprehending the narratives that drive deforestation. 2. Nugent's contributions to environmental discourse analysis, diverse stakeholder perspectives. His work highlights the importance of understanding the different perspectives of stakeholders involved in deforestation, revealing how narratives are used to justify or oppose forest clearing. Tension between development and conservation. Nugent's analysis underscores the challenging balance between economic development and environmental conservation in the Amazon. Complex social context. By delving into the social dynamics in the Amazon, he provides a nuanced understanding of how various narratives interact to shape policy and practice. Stephen Nugent's research provides valuable insights into the narratives surrounding deforestation in the Amazon. His work emphasizes the importance of understanding the diverse perspectives and social complexities that shape environmental discourse in one of the world's most critical ecosystems. 4. Plastic pollution. Jennifer Gabarese, a researcher known for her work in environmental studies and digital culture, has explored environmental topics such as plastic pollution in the context of public discourse. Her work investigates how technological systems, digital infrastructures, and media representations shape the understanding and governance of environmental issues. 1. Key insights from Gabarese's work. Materiality of pollution. Gabarese emphasizes the material aspects of plastic pollution, highlighting how plastics are not just environmental contaminants but also symbols of larger systemic problems related to consumption, waste, and environmental governance. Plastic pollution narratives. She examines the narratives that frame plastic pollution in public discourse, which often involve themes like convenience versus sustainability, highlights the tension between the convenience of plastics in everyday life and the long-term environmental impact of plastic waste. Global impact focuses on how plastic pollution has global ramifications, affecting marine life and ecosystems worldwide. Corporate responsibility stresses the role of corporations in both contributing to and mitigating plastic pollution, influencing discourse around accountability. Technological solutions. Gabarese analyzes how discourse around technological solutions to plastic pollution is framed, sometimes offering overly optimistic views on technological fixes without addressing the root causes of plastic waste. Citizen science and public engagement. She explores the role of citizen science and public participation in shaping environmental discourse. Engaging the public in data collection and environmental monitoring can influence perceptions and narratives around plastic pollution. Digital culture and environmental awareness. Gabarese investigates how digital media and online platforms shape awareness and understanding of plastic pollution, influencing public opinion and advocacy efforts. 2. Gabarese's contributions to environmental discourse analysis, interdisciplinary approach. Gabarese brings together insights from environmental studies, digital culture, and media studies to provide a comprehensive understanding of how plastic pollution is framed in public discourse. Critical examination of narratives. Her work critically examines how different narratives about plastic pollution shape public perception and influence environmental policy. Focus on public engagement. She emphasizes the importance of public engagement and citizen science in shaping discourse and encouraging more sustainable practices. Jennifer Gabarese's research provides a critical lens through which to view the discourse surrounding plastic pollution. Her work reveals the complexity of the narratives that shape public perception and policy on plastic waste, emphasizing the importance of understanding materiality, technological optimism, and digital culture in environmental discourse. 5. Sustainable agriculture and policy. Clive Potter is a researcher who has focused extensively on environmental policy and governance, with particular attention to sustainable agriculture. His work analyzes the language used in policy documents to uncover how discourse shapes agricultural practices and sustainability initiatives. 1. Key insights from Potter's work: policy language and sustainability. Potter investigates how the language used in agricultural policy documents frames sustainable practices. He analyzes the emphasis on sustainability, revealing how policy language can either promote or hinder sustainable agriculture. Narratives of innovation. He examines how policy documents often frame sustainable agriculture through the lens of technological innovation. This narrative promotes the idea that technological advancements are the key to achieving sustainability in agriculture. Economic versus environmental priorities. Potter highlights the tension in policy documents between economic growth and environmental sustainability. He identifies how language reflects these competing priorities, influencing policy decisions that may prioritize economic concerns over environmental benefits. International policy frameworks. His work also delves into how international frameworks and agreements impact the discourse in national policy documents. He explores how global narratives around sustainable agriculture influence domestic policies. Stakeholder perspectives. Potter emphasizes the importance of understanding the different perspectives of stakeholders, including farmers, policymakers, and environmental groups, as these perspectives shape the language and focus of agricultural policies. 2. Potter's contributions to environmental discourse analysis, insight into policy language. His work sheds light on how policy language can shape the trajectory of sustainable agriculture practices, emphasizing the importance of careful language analysis. Tension between competing narratives. Potter's research reveals the tension between economic and environmental priorities in sustainable agriculture, which can significantly impact policy outcomes. Global to local perspective. By analyzing international frameworks and their influence on national policies, he provides a comprehensive view of how global discourses shape local agricultural practices. Clive Potter's analysis of policy documents on sustainable agriculture provides valuable insights into the language that shapes agricultural practices and sustainability initiatives. His work highlights the critical role of discourse in influencing policy and practice in agriculture, revealing the importance of language in driving sustainable development. Conclusion. From Dillon's insights into DAPL discourse to Boykoff's climate change framing, Nugent's analysis of deforestation narratives, Gabory's study on plastic pollution discourse, and Potter's investigation of sustainable agriculture policy, these case studies underscore the significant role language plays in shaping environmental debates and driving action. Frequently asked questions. What is the focus of Jaskier and Dillon's analysis of the Dakota Access Pipeline, DAPL? Jaskier and Dillon's analysis focuses on the discourse surrounding the Dakota Access Pipeline, particularly examining themes of environmental justice and indigenous rights. It highlights the narratives and language used in the debates and protests surrounding the pipeline. How does Maxwell T. Boykoff examine climate change discourse in the media? Maxwell T. Boykoff analyzes how climate change issues are framed in the media. His work investigates the various ways media outlets present climate change, influencing public perception and understanding of the issue. What narratives does Stephen Nugent study in his work on deforestation in the Amazon? Stephen Nugent examines the narratives used in environmental activism related to deforestation in the Amazon. He explores how activists frame the deforestation issue and the strategies they use to engage and inform the public. What insights does Jennifer Gabory's provide regarding plastic pollution? Jennifer Gabory's analyzes the public discourse on plastic pollution. Her work focuses on how the issue is communicated in public debates, influencing attitudes and actions towards plastic waste management. How does Clive Potter investigate sustainable agriculture in policy? Clive Potter examines the language used in policy documents on sustainable agriculture. He investigates how policy discourse frames sustainability in agriculture, impacting policy development and implementation. What are some key themes in the environmental justice discourse around the Dakota Access Pipeline? Key themes include the rights of indigenous communities, environmental protection, and corporate interests. The discourse often centers on issues of sovereignty, environmental degradation, and social justice. What are the common framing strategies identified by Maxwell T. Boykoff in climate change media coverage? Boykoff identifies strategies such as dramatization, scientific uncertainty, and economic implications. These frames influence how audiences perceive the urgency and importance of climate change. How does Stephen Nugent's work on deforestation contribute to understanding environmental activism? Nugent's work provides insights into the strategies used by environmental activists to frame the deforestation narrative, showing how different approaches impact public engagement and policy responses. What discourse patterns has Jennifer Gabarese identified in public discussions on plastic pollution? Gabarese identifies discourse patterns that range from individual responsibility to systemic policy changes. She highlights how discussions shape perceptions of plastic pollution and motivate behavior change. How does Clive Potter's analysis of sustainable agriculture discourse inform policy making? Potter's analysis sheds light on the language and narratives used in policy documents, influencing how sustainable agriculture is perceived and how policies are formulated to address it. In what ways does Jaskier and Dillon highlight the intersection of environmental justice and indigenous rights in her analysis of DAPL? Dillon emphasizes the intersection of environmental justice and indigenous rights by exploring the narratives of indigenous communities and how their voices are represented in the broader environmental discourse around DAPL. What impact does media framing, as discussed by Maxwell T. Boykoff, have on public perception of climate change? Media framing significantly affects public perception by shaping how climate change is understood and prioritized. Frames like dramatization can heighten urgency, while emphasizing uncertainty may lead to skepticism. How does Stephen Nugent's work highlight the challenges of environmental activism in the Amazon? Nugent's work highlights challenges such as navigating political agendas, misinformation, and cultural barriers. His analysis shows how activists must adapt their narratives to effectively engage diverse audiences. What are the implications of Jennifer Gabarese's findings on plastic pollution discourse for environmental policy? Gabarese's findings imply that effective policy needs to address both public awareness and systemic solutions. Her analysis suggests that policy should consider the narratives that resonate with the public to drive effective action. How can Clive Potter's research on sustainable agriculture discourse guide future policy development? Potter's research can guide policy development by revealing how language frames influence the interpretation of sustainability issues. Understanding these frames can help create more effective and targeted agricultural policies.